I am fire, born of fire. My God is a consuming fire.
I want us to touch on this of unmet needs.
Every couple has got its own unique approach to what they call love.
Welcome to On Your Life talk show with Coach Mama Lee.
My God is a consuming fire. He sets me on fire. I am fire, minister of flames. My God is a consuming fire. He sets me on fire.
A warm welcome to you, our valued viewers and listeners. Welcome to your favorite show, On Your Life. And today we have a particularly special edition where we are looking at mental health awareness with a particular focus on those people that find themselves in situations where they have to care for their loved ones that would be suffering from depression or dealing with mental health issues. And today I am your host. Pastor Phil is my name. And our usual host, Coach Mama Lynn, is one of our panelists today because she'll also be sharing her story around that particular subject. We also have a special guest, Tafadzwa Mukambi, who is a specialist in that particular area and will also be giving us a professional view regarding that particular subject. She is the founder of Yananiso Counseling Center, a well-rounded social scientist, systematic family therapist who is experienced in that area. And Mama Lynn, Coach Mama Lynn is a life coach, a certified life coach. She is a pastor. She works with a lot of women as the founder of Phenomenal Woman Roundtable. And she'll also be sharing with us her experience. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Pastor Phil. Thank you.
Welcome. I think to break the ice, I'm going to ask Coach Mama Lynn just to share a bit of a life story, touching particularly a time in her life when she had to look after her mother who had been diagnosed with depression. So I'll just ask her to share her experience briefly, and then we pick it up from there. Over to you, Coach Mama Lynn.
Thank you so much, and welcome our viewers and listeners. Right, today's topic, mental health, for me, it's very personal. It goes beyond the talk show because it's something that I lived, something that I had to live. My mother got sick. I think I was around, should be preparing to go into my Form 4 year. That's when she got sick. And the way this mental illness happens, it's only now that we are gaining ground in terms of mental awareness, especially in Africa and in Zimbabwe. But back then, when my mom got sick, it's about 2 decades ago. You can imagine there wasn't so much information on mental illness. So when I remember that particular day very well, we were coming from, I was with my Nini, who is my mother's young sister, because we were staying with them after we had been evicted from our house, which is another story, but it is linking even with this issue of how my mother's condition even worsened. So we were coming from Chigayo, the millers where we grind our milli mill. And then my brother, it was so out of character for him, just ran to the gate and he was saying, Mama is not well. Mama was right. So we were just like, what's going on? So when we get into the house, at first you think my fun is, because the things that she's saying, and we're like, Mama. And then you're like, this is something, this is serious, you know. So for me, young as I was, it was like, okay, what is happening? What is going on? So that's how it started. And we had no idea what exactly we were supposed to do. And I think the next starting point was we took her to hospital and we were referred to a mental institution in Blawayo called Ingucheni Hospital. And that was my first time to like come to face with people suffering from mental illness. So that was the first time she was admitted. So she got treatment, and then they said she's got what is called chronic depression. That's from what they said it's like the highest level of stress, and they could not really tell us what caused it or what triggered it. And the first episode, I think she got treatment and she was okay, and then we got back home. But we then realized that it was now on and off because she was now on medication. And you know, for a child, you are used to your mom. And I'm speaking from my own personal experience. My mom literally became childlike. And she had this, I think for her, managing reality and the imaginary, it was, you know, from my experience, I always say to people, I think there's actually a thin line between sanity and insanity, because the way one time you think she's okay, the next thing she's in her own world, the next thing she's crying, she's screaming, she's singing, she's hearing voices, she's seeing people, she's talking to these dead people. And you know, when you're a child, your mother is like your go-to person. I was in Form 4. I was at that stage where I was growing up, you know, and I needed a mother. But now the tables had turned on me. I was not prepared for it. I had no book for me to be prepared with. This is what you do. Literally, I became the mother.
Okay, maybe if I can stop you there for a moment. So we see now there was some kind of an exchange of roles where you now literally had to look after her.
Yes.
And you indicated you were in Form 4. I mean, you were still a teenager. Perhaps you can then now explain to us, you know, the kind of care that you now had to practice with regards to your mother, and what kind of burden did that place on you?
Okay. So like I said, we were staying with my Mainini, and then when she had improved, my father got a job in Wange. So we had to transfer and go and live in Wange. And for a while, she was a bit okay, she was managing, and then she relapsed again. So now it was not only taking care of her, but I also had to take care of the family. I always say, in a way, I became a wife in courts, in the sense that I had to make sure the duties that she was supposed to do as a mother, as a wife, she could not do. So early on, I learned how to budget, how to buy groceries, how to make sure the house is in order and everything. So there's that part of me. Now I can't go and play with my friends. I can't even afford to have friends because she needs me. And on her side, what was a big issue with her, my mom could not sleep. I don't know how that linked with me. My mom did not sleep. She would, in a 24-hour day, she would sleep maybe an hour or two. And vasingarari ipapo, everyone else could sleep. My brother could sleep. My father could sleep. I could not sleep. Kungo tsinzinya, she would scream. Vaita mariro. You understand? Shona, when someone has died, and that's how she would cry. Vaita mariro, mwana wangu afa, mwana wangu afa. So I could not afford to sleep. I had to stay awake with her.
Okay, I'll stop you there for a moment. And from what you are saying, perhaps I'll ask Tafadzwa to, to share with us, because now you are explaining the caregiving role that you now had to play. So I want to find out from you, Tafadzwa, maybe from a professional perspective, in cases of depression, in cases of mental health, who is qualified to be a caregiver? Is there some form of training that can be given maybe to family members who are thrust into this particular role?
Okay, it's interesting. Your story is actually it's common. Somebody out there has actually gone through it. And unfortunately, our culture, our country, we do not come from a place where we would understand mental health the way the West would. So culturally, if someone is not well, the burden falls where? On the family. So it's not uncommon that she had to go through what she went through. That is what everybody has gone through. We have been told at Fumuri Hapwa, if something happens, we keep it in the family. And when they say the family, who are they talking about? They're talking about your parents, they're talking about your siblings. And in your case, you would be the oldest child, I assume.
No.
Oh,
So
so
I was
the oldest, the only girl.
The only girl, yeah.
So again, our roles that are determined by society, it just falls that she was expected to do it.
So there's there are gender dynamics.
Yes,
as well.
they were in our culture. I mean, it's obvious. You get somewhere. Iwakazi, what do? You sit on the ground because that's what society has dictated. So someone is unwell. Normally, like you said, Makagara now. In a normal African situation, she would have been sent to her relatives to go and be taken care of there and not stay with you guys, ideally. In the past, that's what they would do. So we didn't have anyone who was qualified to take care of these things. It was done in-house. It was done with the family. If you are not sent back to where you came from, then your children had to take up that burden. They would bring in my nini, like you said. Someone from a household would need to come through and then take over and make sure that she is taken care of. But it was unheard of to send someone away.
Oh, yes.
Unless it was a very extreme case. It was unheard of. So to say that, even now, it's only now that, mental health is in a place where HIV used to be in the 70s and the 80s, where it's now everybody's talking about it. So now, because everybody's talking about it, everybody's like, oh, I think my mother had mental health issues. But because we didn't know what it was, there was no name to what that was. It couldn't be spoken about. There's a taboo. So for us to even streamline and say there are professionals to handle it, it's not like that. Only now that we're now saying, okay, maybe you can go and get help.
Yeah.
But help to who? With who? Who's going to do that?
I'll come back to that aspect. But from what she is saying, it's quite clear now there is some form of disruption, to the family set up as we know it. So maybe you can proceed and perhaps explain to us the kind and the extent, of the disruption, that you experienced as a caregiver.
Wow. Like I said, for me, I didn't have a social life. I could not afford to have a social life. Like I explained, my mother would not sleep. She would sleep maybe an hour or two. So the time she will sleep, that's the time I'll sleep. So it means kana iri pungwe. It is pungwe every day. And we could not afford to leave her alone because number one, we're afraid she will self-harm. Because there are times like during that time where she'll be violent sometimes. And the times when she will refuse to drink her medication. To the extent that sometimes even kwenda kuchikoro kwangu, ndaitomborega kuenda. Why? Because when I come back, you know how family dynamics are. It's like what she said, iwe when very close to your mom. Some relatives may be there, but it's that thing, I would come home and I'll be told, and I'm coming back 5 p.m. I left 7 a.m. for school. So it means from 7 to 5, she did not eat because varama avaskuda kudya. So what will I do? I'll then sit her down, take her food, and I'll cry. I'll remember I would hold her, I'll cry, Mama, each guy. Please, Mama, each guy, And that is the only time she would eat. Because she was, like I'm saying, she is in her own world. But now when she sees me crying, it's like adzoka in the real world. Kuti, mwana wangu ari kuchema. So you are dealing with this back and forth. And for me, I had a roller coaster of emotions. I remember the first thing that I felt when she got sick was anger. I know it doesn't make sense, but for me, I was angry. Kuti, why did you get sick? You're supposed to be the mother. You're not supposed to get sick. You're not supposed. I'm finally kupenga ndimi mama vangu. So imimi mukarwara, then what?
Okay. Very, very interesting perspectives. Perhaps we can also hear from Tafatswa. When you look at the scenario that she's describing, I'm sure there's someone who is watching or will watch who is probably going through the same experiences right now. Are there any coping mechanisms? Is there something that, people in such a situation need to know, which perhaps they can do to minimize, those disruptions or the negative impact of, that burden of caring for someone, who is mentally sick?
She spoke about anger, and you weren't sure where that anger was coming from. They are what they call the stages of grief, and anger is one of them.
Okay.
So you start off with denial, not understanding why is she sick? What's going on? Then anger, like you said, marwari rei. Why is this becoming my problem?
Yeah.
And then when we move from anger, we go to bargaining. Mari,
Exactly.
please, bring my mother back.
And
can she be
also
better?
Guilt again. Why should I feel like this? She's my mom.
She's my mother. What should I do? And things like that. Then after that, the last stage in that process is acceptance.
Yeah.
But people start at different levels. It's not like clear cut. You go from the head.
Okay.
So for one to accept that this is a condition that is there, it comes back to do you even know what it is that you're dealing with?
Exactly.
You cannot accept a condition if you don't know what it is. As a result, that's why people vanoramba kuti hakuna zvakadaro. Tinofamba.
Exactly.
Something has happened. It can't just happen. It's spiritual warfare. There's no illness that just comes. How can someone who was normal all of a sudden is always violent and whatnot? So coping mechanisms at that particular moment, you might not even think of it because you're still in denial. For you to then get to acceptance, to get to then saying, okay, what do I need to cope? You need to accept what is going on around you. And that can only happen if you understand it. Unfortunately, mental health still has so much stigma. I can't go to someone and say that you're bipolar. When you can see which munari bipolar, and they will not understand that. Some of these issues comes from childhood.
Yeah.
There's trauma that someone can go through during pregnancy that can result in mental illness. But do people know that? Your pregnancy, when those 9 months, everybody worries when the baby comes. No one thinks about what has happened prior to inception. So all those things can lead to those challenges. But if you don't know, you're never going to have an idea of how to cope. But let's say you are informed now. Now you know that this is what's happening. The best way is to accept kuti this is what it is. Mama vanorwara. And our problem again goes back to we don't like to accept kuti ndinorwara and ndinofanira kutora mapirits. Even BP, you don't want to drink BP tablets. Everybody's like, try forever living, try this, try that, because we don't want to accept the fact that I'm losing control of my life. So if I have no control, then it means I mean, think about it. If you've got older parents, they don't like losing control about anything. They so the moment that control is you're starting to lose it, despite any age, you're going to struggle. So the first step in trying to cope with any situation is accepting that that is what is there. Then we look for the people that understand what you're dealing with. An example was given where if you have an electrical problem, do you go to a plumber for solutions?
No.
So if you then go to a plumber for solutions for an electrical problem, then you are not going to be given the solutions that you actually need. You might be given a solution that you want, but not what you need. So you need to then find people who can help. It's unfortunate that these days Google is everybody's doctor. So I can go on Google and I can do that. But there are people who are now set out there, professionals who can actually sit you down and say, okay, let's find ways of how to do it. But we tend to go to Anamama, we tend to go kuma pastors, and not taking away anything from my pastors, but sometimes they don't have the skills to deal with these problems. There's, as much as yes, Tinoti, we should pray about it. Some of these issues need you to be actively involved in changing your own mindset. There are therapies that go with that. But if I pray and it doesn't happen, I'm going to come back to you and say, Pastor Phil, makati ndinamata kuchinja one.
Okay, let me stop you there for a moment. We'll come back to that aspect. But I think you raised a very pertinent issues of, tunofamba, when such things do happen. I'm sure she can also share with us, when that thing happened, what did you do as a family? What steps did you take maybe to try and establish what could be the cause, what could be the reason, or what could be the probable solutions? What steps did you take as a family?
Yeah, I agree with what Tafat was saying, because for me, remember, I was a child, and my father is very big on tradition. So Jekufamba is, I understand. And like I'm saying, I was the primary caregiver because I was the only girl. So wherever my dad will go with it. So you find kuti akuna kwatisina kuenda from kunganga. The other Porofita, there's nothing we didn't do, Mazai, whatever. She was made to drink and everything. And I think what made it so hard, even with these things, is my mom, when she was growing up, so for her, in as much as she was losing it, when you get to those places, she would rebel. She didn't want anything to do with it. So now there was also an issue of you understand? And then there was me, who had just received Christ. And I'm going to this church and I am pumped up on my faith. And I'm saying by fire, my mom is going to be well. So Atina chatisina kuita, that I was not exposed to. But I think what then made it even more painful for me was, I remember a particular time when she was admitted, because where she was, I don't know what happened there, but vakaita some concoction, and then she had to go to UBH hospital, where she was said she had developed a brain tumor, and so she had to be for her to release and also to eat. So for me, I was so pumped up and I believed she was going to be healed. For me, that one, it was not a question or anything. And I remember this particular Tuesday, just before she passed, our pastor then said to us, I want people that are believing God for something. And I remember I raised my hand and I said, I am believing that my mom is going to be healed 100%. And I was so excited and people prayed with me. That was on Sunday. I think 2 days later, if I'm not mistaken, it should be on a Tuesday. And then my brother comes. And I remember I was at church again because Zapana service and I attended. I'd gone for some afternoon service. And then I'm being told someone is looking for you. And then I get into the car and I'm made to sit pakati and someone is already something was saying, this is out of order. What is going on? That's when I was told my mom had passed.
Okay, let me hold you there and come back to Tafatma. It's interesting, really, whereby now, like you are saying, we are dealing with a case of mental health, and then you discover that different faith persuasions, medical science on the other hand, and maybe social work on the other, all seem to have different approaches, to how to handle those situations. Perhaps you can share with us from a professional perspective, is there a way of really telling what is the source of this, particular mental breakdown? From your field, is there really a way to tell? Because some would say, okay, if this condition is just medical, then it must be treatable. But now when they realize perhaps there is a continued a breakdown, there is no recovery, that is now when some would then say, we think this is spiritual, which perhaps you can share with us around that area.
Okay, this one is, yes, it's professional, but it's also my, what I've just seen. The medical field has its own, like in Zimbabwe, for example, we've got the medical, we've got Christianity, and we've got African tradition. So if somebody is sick, right, you go to the hospital. And if the hospital, what do? They push you down. They push you down. I think Madi Mambo ita say Mambo Famba. So it's not like we have ignored one of the three. We don't ignore any of the three. So for us to pinpoint and say this, there are things, yes, where we can say this is medical and it needs medication. Some of the issues are spiritual. Right, we cannot take that away from anything, because we as believers, we come from a world that the spiritual realm is there. We can never take that away, right? And then we come from the ATR, right? African tradition is real. That is where we came from. So we cannot separate the three entities that are there, whether it's medicine, whether it's African tradition, whether it is Christianity. We cannot separate the three. So everybody can tell you, or it's medical, or demon. You get what I mean? So there are things, like I said earlier, trauma for anyone can begin by the time when you conceive. As a mother, if I was drinking, smoking, doing drugs, etc., by the time I conceive, I've already caused trauma to this child before over 9 months. It's also. So you can have kids who have issues by the time you are born. Even the process of birth itself can result in trauma. Child abuse. If I am going through trauma, that is medical.
Yeah.
You see, but if I'm going through spiritual trauma, again, it can go there. If I'm going through all the medical, and it comes back to what works for you. So you can't discount it. So as a Christian, if I believe kuti amai vangu pane spirit irikuita, if you go kunonamatirwa zvinopera, because your belief is that strong. Same thing as somebody who believes in the African tradition or kwenda kumaprofita. If they pray for it and they've got a solution for it, zvinopera. And if somebody decides to go the other way again, zvinonopera. But those three things do not link. I think there's actually people who are trying to research and see kuti, kutanda botso in medical terms,
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Maybe before I come back to here, perhaps for you to share with us, the kind of effects taking care of your mom had on her. Maybe I could start with you on the aspect of the one who is looking after the person with a mental breakdown. There could be cases where that person might end up affected as well. How prevalent is that, and what would be going on?
I guess it goes back to the whole thing that I said at the beginning, that if we don't even talk about the actual mental health on the person, what more the caregivers? You know, because it's an expectation to just take care of hama dzedu dzinorwara. I remember, I think it was first year, second year uni. I think it should be first year uni. A cousin of mine was ill, and I think he did drugs. He actually then passed away later on. But when he came to our house, my mother would say, "You mnorara pasi, you rara pambed." You know, you need to make sure to ajga, you need to make sure all those. But I resented him for that. But it was an expectation. I have to make sure that he's taken care of. That is my expectation. So if people don't even focus on the person who is ill, what more in Indurkujita? No one expects you to complain. You cannot complain, because if you complain, who's going to do it? You know, you are supposed, you know, we go back even to the Bible. The Bible is very clear about our roles as children. What am I supposed to do as a child? I'm supposed to respect my parents. I'm supposed to take care of, so that I can see the promise of heaven. So if I then complain, if I get angry, like what you said, the promise of heaven is not going to come, is it? It's not going to come. So complaining is a no-no. You have to suffer in silence. What that then does is, I'm going to build resentment. I'm going to build dopamunozona nokuti anotadza ari kuchema kuti mai vake vafa, nyamba munhu ari kuchema kuti zvaita ndaakuzorora nokuti she's no longer there, not kuti anga asingavade, you know, but the relief yokuti I don't have to do this anymore. So no one focuses on the people who no one focuses on everybody who's watching. You know, I'm thinking about it, you know, you were 16. You're having to bath an adult. You're having to feed an adult, becoming an adult yourself, trying to balance school, trying to balance all those things. And then everybody expects you to pass Form 4. Everybody expects you to be sane when you get married. When you get married, it's not even that. The trauma, you would see, I had to go through. Do I have to do this again? Am I expected to do this again? And people don't understand. And yet Murora is reliving what she had to go through with her own mother. And now she's thinking, do I have to? Especially now, if you can afford it. Again, because culture says what? So no one thinks about the implications. If I then bring a nurse aide into my home to take care of amwene wangu, I can't do that.
You want someone who is a professional.
You want somebody who's got a professional approach to dealing with it. Changing diapers is not an easy job. That is why people go get trained to go and help people. It's not anything. Everybody just assumes. Have you ever stopped to think about kuti munhu iyeye murikumuti atere kumashure, murikumuti akline? People have actually gone to school for that. And they've wanted to do it. But because let's keep it in-house, we're frustrating the person who's next to us. When people then lash out, it's a whole big hullabaloo. Why did it happen? etc. And yet we're not looking at what we've done to that person, because whatever's happened now has implications later on. There are people who don't like getting to hospital, not because they're hard, but the trauma of having to deal with a sick person who my dad is late. And I did body viewing with him and with my other cousin who's also late. I don't do body viewing. Not because I don't respect akafa, but because up until this day, every time I dream about them. Come and get us at Nagufa. So imagine my dad died when I was in Form 4. This is 20 odd years later. And if someone will force you, about viewing, it's not that easy. So it's the same thing. If you've taken care of someone and you've watched them right to the end, you don't want to go through that again. But people expect you to because it is what it is.
Wow. Mama Lynn, let me come back to you. I'll take you back a bit. So now your mother was sick and you were taking care of her. You were going through this range of emotions. Maybe in retrospect, did you think maybe it was possible you could also have had a depression or a mental breakdown, and what probably saved you?
Definitely. For me, I attempted 2-3 times to kill myself during that time. And for me, the killing myself part was not really the burden of taking care of my mom, but it was a lack of support from family. Because I was, in as much as everyone else was there, but the bulk of the job was on me. So for me, I felt, Kuti, maybe if I'm out of the picture, they'll then take it seriously. As in, they'll try other avenues. Kuti, maybe we can go for psychiatric help or evaluation, or maybe we can go, like I told you, I was still born again. Saka inini, I used to follow what you call it, Pastor Chris. And I remember at some point asking, Kuti, can't we take her to healing school? You understand? So for me, being a child, iwewe ndiwe uri kumchengeta, but you don't have a say. Ini munhu uri kuchengeta. You get me? Kwako ngochengeta zvatinenge takudza kuti ita. You understand? So for me, the frustration was, I felt kuti, maybe if we go and look for like a psychiatrist or go to healing school, especially by healing school, it was up to now, I still have that issue of kuti, probably if we'd gone, my mom would have been healed, because I used to see these miracles and I believe in miracles. So for me, it was to the extent of first time I overdosed on her pills. I thought I was going to die, but they made me sleep from morning to, I remember I woke up around 6 p.m. The other time I carried a knife in my bag. And I don't know what my friend was doing in my bag. The next thing, I'm being called to office in a head, and I was warned. The third time, I said to my brother, because we were staying with my nini, and my dad was living elsewhere. I said to my brother, we just need to leave Mama with your sister. This is like, they'll see what they'll do. For me, the state of mind that I am in, if I continue to be here, I'm going to kill myself or I'm going to kill people. Because my other thought was, why not put red poison in these people? Because if over maybe someone will be concerned in my. So it was, that's the kind of, like we are saying, now that I know what depression is, I was depressed.
So these suicide attempts, it was not so much to say, you know what, I'm tired, I just want to go and leave this, but it was somewhat sacrificial to say, if I do this,
yes,
then maybe my mother will get the intervention she needs.
Exactly. You know, when I look at especially mental illness, I always say mental illness is like a cancer. But the challenge with this cancer, it does not affect the patient only. It affects everyone around them. So for me, seeing my mom in that state also affected me. To the extent I felt like I was helpless. I don't have the resources. But maybe if I'm out of the picture, people will stop relying on me so much, so that even they are forced to take this situation seriously. You understand? So, yeah, because, and like I said, there's a whole range of emotions that you feel. The other time you are frustrated. The next thing you are feeling guilty for feeling frustrated against your mom, because this is my mother. You understand? As she change, in as much as she's behaving childish, in as much as she's throwing things around, in as much as she's undressing in front of people, she is my mother. That has to get into my head. But at the same time, I am frustrated. I don't have an outlet. I don't have a way out. So yeah, in Inangu, when I look back, I really believe I was depressed.
Can I give you an illustration of what you're saying? I always find it very interesting. Like, so these would be our emotions, and this is you. So what basically just happened? For a minute, I can hold it up, right? 1 hour. What do you think? 2, am I going to still be able to hold it up nicely? A day, 24 hours, you're holding this up. Eventually, you're going to break.
Yeah.
And without the support to hold it up like this, the weight of the problem doesn't change. The fact that mom was sick didn't change.
No.
The challenge that was there wasn't changing, but the fact that it had to be carried over and over and over with no support, with no emotional support, now everybody's expecting, no, do it. A problem that is usually manageable becomes very heavy to handle. And as a result, we will drop this bottle of water. You start thinking about, let me put red poison. It's going, irrational thoughts begin because you're thinking, because at the beginning, I'm sure at some point it was okay. We can do this. Eventually, the weight becomes heavier. The weight has not changed. But in your mind, you're saying, your mental ability is saying, nope, until you stop.
I'm reminded of a story in the Bible, this young man who was throwing himself into the fire and everything. When the father approaches Jesus, he does not say, help my son. He says, help us.
Yeah.
Meaning they had to reconfigure their lives around the sickness of this boy.
Yeah.
Now I'm looking at a situation of, I'm sure the people around your mother were probably affected in different ways. I'm looking at you and your brother. Did you ever perhaps get an opportunity to talk about that, to share your feelings, even maybe with other relatives that were close to you? And do you think it could have helped if there was such an opportunity?
I think if there was such an opportunity, really it could have helped. Because I've seen, like what you're saying, the problem is not changing. I've accepted that. For me, it was to the extent where I told myself, as long as my mom is alive, I'm not going to get married. And that one I had designed, sealed, and delivered. Because I said to myself, I'm not going to make my mother a burden to another person. So for me, I said no. So for me, I had accepted, this is a lifetime. Until God decides to take her, I'm going to take care of her. But like we are rightfully saying, when you are in it alone, burden yacho inorema. But when you've got other people that come in now, relatives, friends, to also help, even professionals, because for me, this is where the issue is. You also need, there are people like what you're saying that are trained for these things. So they know how to even handle the stress. But for some of us who are caregivers, you find that this thing is thrust on you. You are not even given time to prepare. Just someone who is saying, there's a patient for you that you'll be looking after every 2-3 days, you'll be going there. You are mentally prepared. You are physically prepared. Everything is preparation. But for me, I had to learn by myself. I had no one to train me. I had no one, like I'm saying, the mental health was not as it is now. It's mental health seminar, mental health that back then I didn't even know what it's mental health. I think about a few years back, I was talking to my brother and I was saying, it's only now that I'm learning about mental health that I'm realizing the signs were there, but we did not know. because my mom would, she was that kind of person. I know most mothers are like that, but for her, it was to the extreme. She will know zima stove, and she will ask you, that zima stove, and she will check. When you go to the bus stop, she'll say, Masa, atina kudzima stove. Mama, atina kudzima. She will go back home. We want to go to the city. She will go back home and check. And go back. And then she'll say, you understand? So you will take 30, 45 minutes before she's convinced. And then
So do you think maybe if there was some sort of professional intervention at that stage, it could have helped?
I really think so.
Okay.
Because for us, then even my brother, sometimes you know how boys are. My brother started drinking, and then you come late. She will go stand by the gate 2 hours, 3 hours. Ndakamira mwana wangu. Mama, inga munoziva kuti kudzi ndo zvaanoita. And she will not until my brother comes. She will be standing by the gate.
And the drinking was probably his response to whatever was going on.
That also, because we are very close and we are the ones for him, it was to the extent of he actually went to Zambia for quite a number of years. And for a while, within that state, I also felt betrayed by him as well. Because I was saying, you are the closest that I have. And now you are jumping ship and you are now leaving me, because we were like this in this whatever situation that we're in, trying to cope with it. But I think, men being men, for him, you could not stand seeing his mom like that because he was mama's boy. So for him, he felt leaving the country was a solution. But for me, it made it even worse because that was the only one person who stood by me because we were together. This was our mother. So those emotions also came where I feel like, so you are also, for you, it's easy to just go because you're a guy. But for me, I cannot just walk away like you can. Back to issue of gender, it's expected you can't say I need a break. You can't afford that.
Okay, maybe, I'm just thinking of the term, conspiracy of silence.
Okay.
Whereby even, the extended family, the community, society, these things are talked about in hushed tones. Maybe Tavazo, is there, perhaps what can you say to extended families, to neighbors, who are looking at a situation where someone is dealing with depression, is dealing with mental health issues? What can they do? Because sometimes all they can do is speak about that family, all sorts of theories, but is there something tangible that society can do to lessen the burden on those that are taking care, of people in this situation?
I think we are at a time where we need to start having crucial conversations about these things. And not hiding behind the finger. And everyone at some point has gone through a mental illness of some sort. It might not be depression, it might not be anxiety, but everyone has gone through some kind of it. It's just that others are more extreme about it, and others actually will talk about it. And also because it's a topical issue. Now that people are now talking about it. I think it's important to open up those doors of communication to start even Nilana, because as adults, we carry on traditions, right? And when we carry on traditions, if someone is sick, because you guys are probably and the issue is and that's it. Then there's no talk after that. Nothing, no one. So when kids start running away and coming home late, no one but no one knows or thinks about the fact that they could be reacting to the fact that you brought a sick person into the house. And again, it goes back to culture. We are not in the culture of sending away our sick people. We cannot do that. Ajiti. You know, I remember as a child, my mother took me to see her cousin who at the time had HIV, and you know, kudara, because there was no medication, it was very, very bad.
Yes.
And and you're looking at it and you're thinking, so if that person then comes to stay with us, so what am I supposed to do? There's no education, there's no explanation. As a child, I'm just supposed to accept those romantic. Even my helpers, they do, and auntie vatinogara navo kumba. Tinongonzi zvoni pane vari kuuya mpote muchicleana bedroom avanorara. You know, the community, you just say, pana ariko vari kurwara, saka muri kufanira kuzouya muzongona. You know, watching somebody deteriorate is not a fun thing.
Yes.
It's not. I also go back to my mom's sister, had pancreatic cancer. And she's one of those who so she was told that she had that in December of last year, and we were told that she's got 4 months to live. Right? And she stayed with my mother. I mean, my grandmother, mama. And next week, she's a different frame. The next week, the next week, you know, and you're sitting there, and one of the days, the last time I actually then spoke to her, she held my hand and she cried. And she's like, no, mama, msadaro. At school, we shouldn't do that. We can't. We shouldn't say things like that. You know, everybody was worried about what she was going through, but she was at the end of her time. She knew that say yapera. My grandmother had to share a bed with her and make sure she insisted until, you know, eventually the doctor was like, she can't go back home. We need to keep her in the hospital. But because we are not there yet, we feel like kuyendesa munhu kune institution kurasa munhu. You know, even if you mention good English, you mention annex, so there's
the issue of stigma.
There's stigma. So everybody doesn't want to, you know, so even the community, you know, there was a time you're going to know next to these days it's a no. you can't do that. You can't, you know. So we you know, we've privatized everything. But if we sit down as a family and say, Wanango, my ninta now, she is not well. We need to find a way. Say, like you're saying, if you are consulted, as people don't want to consult children, but so it's important to have crucial conversations. It's not like our children don't know what death is. They don't know what illness is. Sit them down, explain, this is what we're dealing with. This is what is going on. Are you comfortable with doing it?
Wow, interesting. Mama Lynn, my last question to you, just a quick one. How did you heal from this experience? And perhaps, do you think if there were all these interventions that we were talking about, that healing could have come earlier or could have happened speedily?
Certainly. But for me, I've always said two things that really helped me to heal. Number one, my faith. In as much as I prayed, but the fact that I had that faith and I was grounded in my faith, I think that became my saving grace, because that is the only thing that I had. And the faith community, the faith family that I then had, the mothers that I found in the church, they were always on my beck and call to make sure I'm okay, to pray for me. So I think my faith for me really helped. The other thing for me that made or always makes my journey of healing easier and a lot quicker. I always say to people, I heal when I heal others. I remember I shared about my story with my mom, and someone inboxed me. I think that was about 10 years back. And they said, thank you so much, because I am in a similar situation with my sister. And your story really helped me. So from then, I went on a quest to say, for me, I'm a person who believes when I talk about something, the burden is lessened. There's something just therapeutic about talking. The way we are just talking like this, it's for me, I take a step to heal. When someone comes and say, your story helped me, that's another step to my healing. So for me, my faith, and also using my story, my testimony to also help another person in a similar situation is something that really helped in my journey of healing.
Interesting. And my last question to you, Tafaz, well, what could be some of the coping mechanisms, that perhaps mental health professionals could help, families or caregivers with, so that the burden is lighter? Are there any, what they can share with people in this situation?
I think what's important is just making sure that people are aware of what is happening. There's no need to hide it. It could be a child who's going through this, it could be an adult, it could be anyone. There's no need to hide it. If something is happening within your family, just talk about it. Make it open. Allow people to share their experiences and expectations so that they understand. The danger that we have is we exclude certain people because we think they don't know. But every child has a phone. They will Google and they will tell you, Kuti, you are sick because of A, B, C, D. So instead of letting the world teach your child or teach your family what is going on, have a round table. This is what we are dealing with. Mama havanzwe zvakanaka. Your brother any problem. Your sister any challenge. This is how. That way, you include them in the process of adapting. You include them in the process of healing. You include them in the process. Even then, the person who's affected, Anditi, also knows Kuti, the support system is real. And everybody can accommodate me and we can but if we exclude and treat it like it's a taboo, when we're just perpetuating the problem. We're at a point where we can no longer keep quiet or hide from the realities that we're actually facing.
True.
I think just to add on what she said, I think one other concept that us Africans are yet to adapt to is the issue of support groups. When I was going through what I was going through with my mom, I thought I was alone. But the day I stepped to Inguchen, when she was admitted, and I'm seeing all these people, even when we'd go for reviews, and I'm seeing all these people, this one is their relative, this one is this, and I'm seeing there are more than 10, 15 people. Even when you go there, when she's admitted, there are a lot of people that are admitted. That's when reality is to say, this thing is like more common than we'd care to admit. You understand? So I feel like we need to, Alcoholic Anonymous, why not have our own support group? This one I'm throwing to mental health professionals and even like we're saying these days, ingorinya mental health, but let's also look at the caregiver. Because if we are not careful in trying to help this one, uyu wacho muchacho achazoita a mental case because of the burden that she's going through. So as much as we are concentrating on the patient, let's also have facilities for like vanhu vakaita sana Tafi. Ngavatitiro mafacility kuti people can just come and share. It's not necessarily saying you're going to solve my problem. But kungotaura umwe munhu achi inini anozodai so kana vanise vangu mama vanozo you find kuti when there's that comfort when you talk about it kuti unototi pane vanhu vanogara chiti when dambudziko rako rikaiswa apo unotozoti beta nditakure rangu. So when you have, for me a support group is like that. When we share our issues, but in that conversation, when we have such support groups in our communities, I think they will go a long way to help.
Thank you so much, Mama Lynn, for that addition. I'll just ask Tafazwa perhaps to close for us in prayer.
Okay, let's pray. Father God, we thank you for this time that you've given us. We thank you for this opportunity to talk about the issues that are out there and very topical at the moment. We pray, oh God, that if there's someone out there who is actually going through this today, they have been helped by understanding and knowing that they are not alone. Father, your word says in Ecclesiastic, nothing is new under the sun. So whatever you're going through, someone else has gone through it, and someone can be there to hold your hand through it, oh God. We thank you for this time. We thank you for this opportunity. We thank you for this show that is giving light to issues that are not discussed, that are not sometimes uncomfortable to talk about, but you've allowed them to have a platform to discuss these issues and to make things known. We thank you for this opportunity. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Let me just thank our special guest, Tafadzwa Mama Lynn, for coming through and sharing your insights with us concerning mental health awareness. Let me also thank the crew behind the scenes, our partners, Zim Daily, and you, our viewers and listeners. Thank you for being part of this program. We hope to see you next week. I'm Pastor Phil, and I'm out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fire, fire.